Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. The Hollywood Ripper is sentenced to death for killing and mutilating 2 women.
Mr. Gargiulo's life work is quite literally to viciously attack women.
And the Wisconsin man who reported his parents as missing now charged with murdering his father. The grisly details as his mother still remains missing.
There is a lot of evidence in this case.
Plus, the trial begins for a South Carolina man accused of murdering a college student who allegedly got into his vehicle thinking he was her Uber driver. The case has sparked nationwide calls for reform on rideshare safety. And an arrest made in the shocking kidnapping attempt of a 5-year-old boy, the boy's mother fighting back. Plus, another turn in the Robert Durst trial as a New York real estate investigator talks about reopening the case into the real estate heir's missing wife, Kathy.
I didn't want Mr. Durst to know that the kid.
On Crime Daily, I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. The Hollywood Ripper, the serial killer that terrorized Los Angeles in the early 2000s, was sentenced to death. The families of his victims say this is a long-awaited justice.
Defendant Michael Gargiulo is a sadistic, thrill-killing psychopath.
The Hollywood Ripper was sentenced to death for murdering 2 women. A jury recommended he be executed in October 2019, but his formal sentencing was delayed due to the pandemic.
Mr. Gargiulo has led a life of crime and violence and has left a swath of death, grief, and destruction behind him.
Gargiulo was caught in 2008 after Michelle Murphy bravely fought him off of her as he stabbed her in her bed. A trail of blood from her apartment to his led police to linking him to the murders of 32-year-old Maria Bruno and 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin.
Sometimes you'll just be sitting in a room and you'll look at a door, you'll just stare at a door and you go, oh, she could only come through that door. I'd give anything. I ache for her. I ache to hold her. I ache to hear her voice, to hug her.
Actor Ashton Kutcher testified at trial he was waiting to pick her up for a date in 2001, looked through her door when she did not answer, and saw red stains that he thought was blood. Ellerin was later found dead in her home with 47 stab wounds. Prosecutors say Gargiulo lived near her just like he lived next to his next victim, Maria Bruno. She was found dead in her home in 2005, her body mutilated and her breast implants cut out of her. Bruno was separated from her husband at the time, who was cleared as a possible suspect. The couple shares 2 young children, then just 2 and 5 years old.
I mean, ultimately, I had to divulge the information that their mother, had been killed. And would no longer be present in their lives.
Gargiulo was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, but prosecutors say they can link him to the attacks of 11 different women. They believe his first was 18-year-old Tricia Picasio in 1993, the sister of his friend in Illinois.
When I saw her and I realized that she was completely lifeless and there was absolutely nothing that I could do to help her. Every year of my life, I remember it like it was yesterday.
The defense says the prosecution's labels of Gargiulo as a serial killer, psychopath, and psychotic prove he has mental health issues.
In this country, we don't execute the mentally ill.
The judge refused to allow it in a statement from the newly elected Los Angeles district attorney who opposed the death penalty. But there is currently a moratorium on executions in California. Gargiulo is now awaiting trial for Tricia's death. The Cook County State Attorney's Office says they plan to seek to have him extradited. Joining us today is legal analyst Dina Dahl and Terry Austin. Dina, with all the back and forth with the new district attorney, the moratorium on the death penalty, and upcoming trial, where does that leave Gargiulo? Executed or not?
Well, for now, not executed. I mean, usually always somebody is on death row for quite a bit of time before they have a scheduled execution to allow all the appeals to finish. But in the case here, even once he's exhausted his appeals, while there's a moratorium, he will not be executed. And it sounds like the family is very upset about this, but laws do change traditions in a way, you could call it this, of whether or not a state wants to execute or not. For now, California doesn't want to do that.
Absolutely. We've seen that from a few California cases like this. Terry, what was your reaction when you first heard from the victims' families and how Gargiulo devastated their lives?
You know, it's horrible, Brian. This is a very devastating case. And to think that there might be 11 possible murders connected to this one individual Countless family members have been affected. Right now, we know for a fact, because you heard on the stand there, that there are children who don't have mothers now, husbands with no wives, parents with no daughters. And whether or not he actually is executed, this is certainly a case that deserves the death penalty, if no other case does. This one does.
And that is the Hollywood Ripper GARGIULO, who has been sentenced to death, even though there's a moratorium on the death penalty in California. Thank you both. Turning now to other top legal news, actor Isaiah Stokes has been indicted in New York for the murder of a man in a parked car. Stokes is known for his role in the TV shows including Law & Order, Special Victims Unit, Broadway Empire, and Power. Prosecutors say video surveillance shows Stokes getting out of a parked car on February 7th, then firing 11 gunshots into a car in Queens, killing 37-year-old Tyrone Jones. On Friday, a grand jury indicted Stokes on second-degree murder and criminal possession of a weapon. He faces 25 years to life in prison if convicted. And a Florida man will spend 8 months behind bars for the first felony sentence in the Capitol riot. Paul Hodges was captured on surveillance video inside the Senate chamber on January 6th. Last month, he pled guilty to 1 count of obstructing official proceeding. He told the judge he is remorseful and regrets his actions. The FBI is continuing to look for more suspects and released this video of a man accused of assaulting an officer during the insurrection. Co-host Terry Austin is here with more top news making headlines at the Law and Crime Network.
Brian, a man accused of trying to kidnap a 5-year-old boy in New York City has been arrested after police say he also tried to attack an officer. The NYPD released this video from Thursday showing the brazen attempt. The young boy is stepping just in front of his mother as a man gets out of his red vehicle and snatches the boy. The man runs with the boy back to his car, but his mother never gave up, ran to the car, pulling the young boy to safety through the open passenger side window. 24-year-old James McGonagall is charged with attempted kidnapping and reckless endangerment. Police say he went to a hospital on his own and attacked an officer while being fingerprinted. His alleged accomplice is still wanted.
Thank God that young boy is still back with his mother. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, jury selection in the so-called fake Uber driver case that rocked the entire nation, calling for rideshare safety reform. But first, a father dismembered, a mother vanished. Their son reported him as missing, why he's now behind bars. Next. Welcome back. A Wisconsin man is charged with kidnapping, killing, and dismembering his father, and the man's mother is still missing. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with more details about the disturbing case.
Brian, sheriff's officials in Dane County, Wisconsin say Chandler Halderson reported his parents missing on July 7th, but now he is charged with killing his father, Bart, and investigators are hopeful that they'll find his mother alive.
Sheriff's officials say they found Bart Halderson's torso with a gunshot wound in a wooded area. His wife, Krista, is still missing. Their 23-year-old son, Chandler, faces charges including first-degree intentional homicide, giving false information, and hiding a corpse.
The defendant has taken steps to both destroy and conceal evidence, including human remains that were dismembered.
During a hearing to set Chandler Halderson's bail, the prosecutor said he went to great lengths to conceal the crime.
There is a web of lies that is quite impressive if it wasn't, frankly, so tragic.
A criminal complaint says a witness reported seeing Halderson near her property with his parents' car a few days before Bart Halderson's body was found nearby.
Mr. Chandler, or Mr. Halderson, Chandler Halderson, sits here today with no prior record. A lifelong resident of the state, a high school graduate, involved in many activities, such as Boy Scouts, church groups.
Evidence of rope and knots being tied, such that an Eagle Scout might do.
Krista Halderson remains missing, but the sheriff hopes she'll be found safe.
So I'm always optimistic and hopeful for a positive outcome in regards to this incident and the missing Krista Halderson, and I will let our investigation and the evidence tell me otherwise.
A judge set Chandler Halderson's bail at $1 million. He'll be back in court in Wisconsin later this month. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Here to discuss a missing mom and dismembered dad is legal analyst Dina Dahl and Terry Austin. Terry, let's start with a question everyone is thinking. Do you think the mother is dismembered and we just haven't found her yet?
Well, Brian, I, like the sheriff, want to remain as positive as possible, but based on what we heard during this first appearance, it doesn't seem as though his mother is going to be alive at all, if they even are able to find her remains. It sounds like these are very serious and violent charges, like the state said. This individual tried to destroy all of the evidence. He misled the police, and he did this purposely with these knots that he tied. So I think that the chances are the mother is not going to be found alive. Chances are she, like her spouse, will be found dismembered. So I think there was a web of lies here, as the state said, and I think that it's going to be very difficult to actually find her alive.
Well, as you said, I hope, as well as the sheriff said, that we find her alive, if not, at least some sort of solace or closure for the family. Dina, so far we haven't heard a lot of direct evidence. No one's going to take the stand and say, I saw him do it. So how is the prosecution going to prove this case?
Well, they're going to prove it using what we call circumstantial evidence, which is actually how most trials are proved. It's very rare to have a direct witness to a crime like this. And so they're going to put forward, like they've saying that they have all these lies that they know about and that there's, a lot of evidence in the case. Whether or not this is them posturing at this point, we'll find out when it goes to trial, but they will be methodical, as they always are, and eliminate other possibilities and maybe show to a motive as to why he would do it. His ability to do it. She mentioned right there about the Eagle Scout, which I thought was, a really good point. The defense was trying to use that for his character, and she instantly used it as his means to commit the crime, that he was able to tie these kind of knots. This is what we're going to be seeing if this ends up going to trial.
Yeah, this might be the first trial that we see a knot tying expert from one of the Boy Scouts of America. And Jeanette, what is some of the evidence investigators say they found at the Halderson's house?
Well, Brian, the criminal complaint says that when a deputy went into the home to investigate this complaint, he saw portions of the floor missing, along with a half wall in the home that was also missing. There was only an outline of that left. Also, there were other remains, and we don't know who they belong to, found in Sauk County, Wisconsin. And the sheriff told me today that there is a photograph placing Chandler Halderson in that area where those remains were found. Work is still being done to identify those remains.
Interesting, as that case still continues and we still get more evidence and more information. Thank you all for contributing. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, why has the body of Robert Durst's first wife never been found? Plus, the case that sparked nationwide outrage over rideshare safety concerns. Welcome back. Jury selection is now underway in the South Carolina trial of a man accused of murdering a young woman after she got into the wrong car, thinking it was her Uber driver. 27-year-old Nathaniel Rowland is charged with kidnapping and murdering 21-year-old Samantha Josephson. Josephson was a student at the University of South Carolina. She was last seen on surveillance video around 2 a.m. in March 2019, getting into the backseat of a car she thought was her Uber. Investigators say the child locks were on, preventing her from opening the doors from the inside. She was found 14 hours later, stabbed 30 times. Rowland was arrested the same day, and court records show her blood and cell phone were found in his car. The case sparked a nationwide movement on rideshare safety. The hashtag What's My Name Foundation was made in honor of Samantha, and her parents advocated to Uber and Lyft to add a feature that allows users to call 911 from their apps. Rowland says he's innocent and claims someone else had his car that night as he was passed out at a party. Opening statements are scheduled for Tuesday morning. Let's bring back legal analyst Dina Dahl and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, this case sparked a movement of safe driving, especially for women who take Ubers alone, called hashtag What's My Name. What's the hashtag about, and can it influence this case?
Well, let's hope so, Brian. The hashtag is to raise awareness so that everyone, not just women, everyone is aware that you must make sure that your Uber and or other driver, Lyft driver, is who they say they are. And the foundation was really made in honor of Samantha Josephson. And we've had a lot of celebrities like Darius Ruckus, Jason Alexander. They've made PSAs, public service announcements, to raise the awareness and also to raise money, not just awareness. So they're actually holding a walkathon in September to raise more money, Brian, so that everyone becomes aware of this and that everyone protects themselves against this kind of thing happening again.
Yeah. Double check the license plates when you get to the car. Ask them, what's my name? Make sure you're safe out there, regardless of who you are. Dina, it's his car. Child locks are on. Where do you think the defense will go in arguing for Rowland?
Well, it sounds like they're going to be arguing that although it was his car, he wasn't actually in the car, which seems like probably the only argument they can make, because there's video footage showing her being in the car and there's blood in the car. It's true that that video footage we just saw, you really can't see who's in the car. So whether or not this does become a difficulty for the prosecution to actually put him in that location is, we'll see. He claims he's at a party. Will there be witnesses who will testify that, yes, he was at the party? Will the prosecution be able to poke holes into that corroboration? That's, I think, where it's going to come down to. And perhaps there's other video footage that we just didn't see in this moment that may be able to tell who's driving the car.
All right, forensics, video, credibility of witnesses will make sure to keep you up to date on this case as Law and Crime continues to follow it. Thank you both. When we come back, linking the murder of Robert Durst's best friend to the disappearance of his first wife. The investigators who sought out to solve the decades-old case, next. Welcome back. Prosecutors in the Robert Durst murder trial are calling the lead investigator in the reopening of the case of the real estate heiress' missing wife in New York to talk about the murder of his key witness. Joseph Becerra was working for the New York State Police in 1999 when he says he was contacted by a man he arrested for public lewdness, who said he had information about the 1982 disappearance and murder of Kathy Durst. The information turned out to be a bust, but piqued the investigators' interest to reopen the case. Kathy's body has still never been found. Durst is now on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman, in December 2000. Prosecutors say Berman threatened Durst that she'd go public with information about Kathy's death.
I think it was a number of Kathy's friends and her family who brought up Susan's name.
When were you planning on speaking to Susan Berman?
Probably at some point going into the new year. There wasn't a definitive date set at that point.
Okay. And had you ever reached out to Susan Berman to let her know you wanted to speak with her?
No, I did not.
Were you the lead investigator on the case?
I was.
Were you the one in charge of determining who was and wasn't going to be spoken to?
Yes.
If someone were going to speak to Susan Berman, would you know about it?
I would hope so.
California prosecutors believe Durst murdered his wife, bought items from a hardware store, and then disposed of her body in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, an isolated area made famous by The Sopranos.
Counsel, will you stipulate that defendant Robert Durst used his chemical bank Visa card to make a purchase at the Caldor store located in Ridgefield, Connecticut on February 1st, 1982?
Yes.
And you buy tools there?
Yes.
You buy drop cloths there?
Yes.
Buy trash bags?
Yes.
Tarps?
I'm sorry?
Tarps?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the area known as the Pine Barrens?
Yes.
How long is that drive down there?
About 2.5 hours.
What is the Pine Barrens like, that area?
Pine Barrens is this vast area, hundreds of thousands of acres of pine trees and sand.
Are you familiar with the areas where two locations where phone calls were made in this particular case?
I am.
Dina, after the prosecution's direct, sparks flew about the relevance of this witness. Was it relevant in any way to you?
I mean, they argued that it was relevant because they were trying to show that Durst became aware of the reopened investigation. They're trying to show the motive for why he would have killed Susan Berman. And at the time, he even said that Susan Berman thought she was contacted by somebody in New York regarding the investigation. So that's why the prosecution is arguing that it is relevant. It was, what did Robert Durst know at the time that Susan Berman was killed about whether or not there was this reopened investigation with his former wife?
Interesting. I'm sure when Robert Durst takes the stand, he have a lot of words to comment about that. Terry, this was a new set of eyes on a reopened case, and another officer on the stand. How much did he add to the actual trial?
You know, I think when he came in 1999, people really thought he was going to have a new set of eyes and make some real progress on the case, because that's what usually happens when you have a new investigator. And as he said, he was the lead investigator here. But he's got mixed reviews. People said that he failed to actually interview most of the witnesses he had talked about. And they said that he was a camera hog and was really in it for the publicity. So I think that, you know, he didn't have the bang for the buck, and they eventually kicked him off the case.
All right, thank you for that, everyone. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.